and you gave one heck of a speech here today. The crowd, you got a fantastic response from the crowd. What do you think are some of the issues that you are going to focus on if you win the general election? What are your pet issues?
Well, I will tell you, in my conversations with some of the speakers that will be here later tonight, Mike Lee, Jim DeMint, those and Rand Paul, they know, as I know, if we don't turn this economy around, we will not know America as we know it today. We have to work kind of on a multi-front attack to change the tax code to make us more competitive internationally, to cause people to want to invest their money here. We have to change the regulatory environment, because if we don't start to roll back and put the toothpaste back in the tube for some of these regulatory agencies, people can't make any money, and they're quitting on America. I mean, there's too much money flowing outside the United States. You know, those are the things we have to address to deal with the economy first and foremost. We have to send a message of certainty so that people know what the rules are. As I spoke tonight about the Chrysler bankruptcy of 2009, that was such a seismic shockwave in the business world that secured creditors could pick up the Wall Street Journal and suddenly find out being a secured creditor doesn't mean what they think it means, because the government will come in and cancel a contract between two individuals to make up the rules as they want to make them. That was a horrifying moment.
When we talk about Obamacare and, you know, the what feels like a monumental task of repealing it, a lot of conservatives that I talk to, and I feel like I'm one of them, what we're worried about when it comes to the Republican Party is that, say we have this tidal wave in November and Mitt Romney wins the presidency, Republicans take over the Senate, and you got the House, that there's going to be a temptation in some Republicans to not go for a full repeal, but to try to fix it. What do you say to conservatives that are concerned about that?
Be concerned. I mean, never let up. Alexander Hamilton's famous quote, "The price of liberty is eternal vigilance." Even if we have a majority of Republicans, it's not good enough unless we have a majority within that majority of conservatives. You know, that's one of the defining moments for me when I decided if or not I was going to do this. I had a discussion with Senator Jim DeMint, and he told me that if they got just 3 or 4 truly conservative senators, he felt they could begin to change the direction of the Senate. And frankly, it was one of the moments when I thought maybe I was destined to do this.
One of the things that, you know, it's brought up a lot too is the EPA. What do you see happening if we do have this tidal wave? We start seeing Congress and hopefully the president try to rein in some of the EPA's power.
Well, I think it will happen. You know, with all the outcry and justifiable outcry of a month ago when the Supreme Court ruled in the health care bill, it buried in the news an equally big story from the District Court of Washington, D.C. the day before, when that court approved the EPA's authority to consider carbon dioxide a pollutant. Now, I don't want to geek out. I'm a geologist. I'm a science geek here. But understand that if carbon dioxide, which you and I exhale with every breath, if that is a pollutant, we have given the EPA just unlimited license to start regulating everything. And it has to be rolled back. It is just absolutely crazy. I often use the Keystone Pipeline as the perfect example of how mission creep has overcome the U.S. government. About the time I was entering the workforce, the EPA was being formed. It was to be an administrative agency. And every state had to have its own EPA, and every state formed it. Well, every state EPA along the route of the Keystone Pipeline has approved the pipeline based on that local geology, local hydrology, local topography, local botany, and yet now the federal regulators say, oh no, we're smarter about your state and your state's environment than you are. That's a great overreach, and Republicans should be talking about this is why we have to roll back the EPA.
I'm a resident of suburban Indianapolis, and living in Indiana, seeing the fight over right to work. And now that Indiana is a right to work state, I know it's still in its infancy, but what kind of results are we seeing in Indiana?
We're already seeing tremendous interest. There have been several businesses that expanded, made announcements of expanding their operations in Indiana immediately after that vote. You know, I'm sure you'll appreciate as a Hoosier that I like to say the biggest thing that we have going for economic development in the state of Indiana is the state of Illinois.
Just about that, yeah.
Because as it is the classic case. As that state continues to raise corporate taxes, raise personal property taxes, raise excise taxes, Lake County, Indiana, southern part of the county, is actually having a boom right now because so many people are leaving Illinois they're voting with their feet.
And it's really astounding, too, when you've got the state of Michigan. It's starting to creep more towards, with Governor Snyder up there, you creep towards some of the reforms that have been made in Indiana that, you would think that it would be Michigan because Michigan's such a union, the birth of the UAW, but the fact that Illinois, it seems they're getting surrounded by states that are either right to work or creeping towards right to work.
They really are, and it's going to sound as if I'm changing directions on you. I'm not. Bear with me for just a moment. But we hear so much about how there's no sense of bipartisanship in Washington and how people can't work together anymore. Well, let me make the point that Congress does reflect the American people. When you have states like Illinois that think it's okay to live beyond your means, it's okay to spend money you don't have, it's okay to tax more and more, they have their representatives in Washington who think that. In Indiana, we think we ought to live within our means. We ought to balance our budget. We ought to make government smaller, and we have done all those things. Our credit rating's gone up even as the national credit rating's gone down. And so we have those people in Washington who feel that. Mr. Lincoln once said that prior to the Civil War, the present agitation must continue until one side prevails or the other in the public mind. We have to have people who will make the argument for conservatism so that more people see that as a way to hope as opposed to a government handout.
Richard Mourdock, the Indiana State Treasurer, is joining us on Snark Factor. Now, you mentioned Indiana. We've got a fiscally healthy state. Then you've got ticking time bombs like Illinois and California, and you're seeing cities in California filing for bankruptcy. How, as someone who you're the treasurer of Indiana, fiscally sound state, you look at these other states, these are ticking time bombs for the country, and they're going to seek a federal bailout at some point, won't they?
I fear that is the case. I started quite a uproar at one of our meetings of the National Association of State Treasurers not long ago by saying that we should send a letter to the federal government saying that we would support the position where there not be bailouts of the states. And as you can imagine, it was quite a firestorm in our executive committee hearing because it's a very controversial issue. And it is a true statement. One of the people who was adamantly against it said if we even talk about that, it causes those states' bond costs, their borrowing costs, to go up because it expresses uncertainty. Well, guess what? When you have California in the shape of it's in, newsflash, it's not uncertainty. I mean, it's already out there. And when you add up the congressional votes from New York, California, Pennsylvania, Illinois, you start adding those up, you've got almost half the members of the U.S. House of Representatives, and that's scary.
Well, and then you people from around the country just want to throw their arms up in the air and think it's a hopeless situation when California is in the financial straits that it is, and then they're going to enact this high-speed rail boondoggle that's going to cost billions of dollars, but money they don't have.
That's right, and they just want to borrow and borrow and borrow. I heard the interesting statistic recently. In fact, Governor Daniels shared this with me, so I'll give full credit here. I think the number was 40 million people in California, and they have a graduated income tax, unlike many states. With 40 million people, half of all the income taxes come from a group of 56,000 people. Each one of those people pays millions in taxes, and they're leaving in droves. And every time they leave, they ought to be shutting down the state program, but of course they don't.
No, of course not. Well, listen, I know you're a busy man. Richard Mourdock, candidate for the Senate in the great state of Indiana. Before we let you go, please let everyone know where they can find out more about you and where they can contribute to your campaign.
Well, please check us out at richardmourdock.com. Mourdock has a bit of an unusual spelling, M-O-U-R-D-O-C-K, richardmourdock.com. We've got all our news releases, and yes, that all-important donate button is there, and we're trying to keep raising $1 million a month to be ready for November 6th.
Richard Mourdock, thank you so much for joining us on FTR Radio's coverage of FreePAC.
My pleasure.